Good evening. Welcome to TDM Talk Show. In a time of pandemic, accurate information may just be something that can save your life. We used to rely on media for that, but its role has been challenged in a recent decade as more people are sourcing for information themselves from the internet or their social media chat groups. So what role should media play in this era of information overload, coupled with a pandemic? We have José Matias, president of the Macau Portuguese and English Press Association and a visiting professor of the University of St. Joseph Media and Communication Program to tell us what he thinks. Welcome to our program, José.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what do you think that media's role should be in this time of pandemic?
Before addressing your question, I'd like to highlight and share with you and the viewers how especially meaningful it is for me to be here. As I used to be sitting over there, so now I'm here. Yeah. It might feel a little bit strange at the beginning, but I'll try my best. This feels like being back home to TDM, and especially and namely to TDM Talk Show. Another word of solidarity at a global scale. These have been truly unprecedented times, and it is affecting all of us. Solidarity, of course, with all those who are losing their loved ones every single day by the thousands and growing. Solidarity with the heroes, the frontline heroes, medical staff, but also many other people who are working around the clock under tremendous pressure. Very, very challenging situation for all of them, those who are working in the public security forces, in the civil protection bodies, and journalists. Actually, I mean, that's the crux of your question.
Yeah.
We do play a key role here, and this, I think, is being acknowledged and recognized by the public, because at the end of the day, journalism is about delivering a public good.
Okay.
It might be a publicly owned entity or a privately owned entity, but the fact of the matter and bottom line is that we deliver a public good. And at a time of an unprecedented crisis such as the one that we're going through, it is a critical public service. You mentioned rightly at the beginning, at the onset of the show, that obviously we are in a different place from where we were, let's say, for instance, 17 years ago, by the time of the SARS crisis. Actually, that's when I arrived in Macau. Of course, we already had the internet, but it was before Web 2.0, before the rise of social media, Facebook and all that, of course. So now, it might resemble to some or to many people as a sort of chaotic situation.
Yeah.
And that's why all of us, journalists, we have to rise to the challenge. It is a huge challenge and puts a lot of pressure. It might take a toll on our mental health. And actually, here in Macau, I think we are so far blessed. We haven't experienced anything truly dramatic. But in mainland China, look at what our colleagues have been going through. The population, especially in Wuhan and Hubei, and now in Europe and the United States and elsewhere in the world. So definitely, the role is pivotal, is critical, and it requires an awareness from authorities, from the society, and from ourselves as a sense of duty.
But, you know, our role, journalists' role, are usually to, of course, first and foremost, to find the truth and to reveal it to the world, to our audience. But sometimes the truth is not really going to be comfortable with some people, especially sometimes with the government, with the authority, sometimes journalists would reveal things that the government may think, oh, this is not really the time for you to tell this kind of story to the public. And it is especially during this kind of crisis that government would say that, some governments would say that, oh, media should probably work with the authority, that, they should do it exactly for the public good. So how are we going to reconcile between our role as somehow a supervisor or monitor,
exactly,
versus the role of spreading the truth and defending the public good?
Yes, that's a fundamental question that you're posing, and the way you are framing it up. It is a huge challenge. The truth, seeking the truth or speaking the truth to power, as they say, but seeking the truth, not in a philosophical way, but in an intellectually honest way, is part of our DNA. It's our raison d'être. That's why exactly we exist. Yeah. But as you said, while authorities and governments quite often they don't necessarily deal at ease with what they may consider something that is not so, that might be inconvenient, because there are a number of inconvenient truths, right? So there's always this tension, always this dialectics that we are going through. This has been the case ever since we have journalism and the media, especially in a relatively or considerably free environment. Yeah. Yes. Whenever we are facing this kind of crisis, and we are before something truly unprecedented, governments all around the world would tend and aim at leading the way, so leading the information, right? Yeah. So because in the name, of course, of public interest, right? But journalists also perform a role in the name of that public, delivering that public good, and in the name of public interest. And it's part of our role to scrutinize what authorities are doing. But now it's a particularly challenging time, and we are before some dilemmas quite often. But I think despite being in an exceptional situation, there's obviously a sense of responsibility, which is extremely important. But we have to keep a close eye and prevent being dragged into a situation or sleepwalking into a situation where we throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to say. Having a well-educated and sufficiently aware civil society is always extremely important, and having governments that understand our role. Not in an adversarial way, but actually in a way that is part of the wider public interest. It is extremely, extremely important. But you have a lot of challenges, and actually we've seen recently, let's say for instance in Hungary, where you have the government led by Prime Minister Viktor Orbán invoking and being able to tabling a set of bills that granted emergency powers to the Prime Minister in a de facto and de jure power grab, which is highly questionable. And actually it does put a lot of pressure, and it does put press freedom at stake in Hungary. So we see this even in a European country, which is a member state of the European Union, let alone in countries of a more authoritarian persuasion.
But should we, let's say if we are facing this kind of issue now in Macau, do you think we should still ask the tough question, or should we just keep it for later? Because it seems that for now, everybody, including the government, is saying that we should first tackle the pandemic, and let's not do other things now. Should we still ask the tough question?
I think so. We should definitely continue to ask the questions, because at the end of the day, of course, I mean, one has to ask the questions in a proper way, but the question itself, questions are obviously valid, and actually, because to find out the answers is something that will, at the end of the day, benefit all parties, and of course, including the government, and many people in the government also understand that. And actually, let's say, for instance, in Macau, something that we've been witnessing since late January, if I'm not mistaken, is that authorities are holding press conferences on a daily basis, and they allow for a number of very diverse questions. The chief executive, for instance, he did hold 3 press conferences, and he has been given plenty of time, I guess, for journalists to ask the questions they deem important. So I believe that there's this idea or awareness that the role of the media is important, and allowing journalists to ask the questions they deem relevant is of paramount importance. Of course, I mean, we're all human beings, and I guess the sense I would obviously presume that all of us want to see as part of a community. So in addition to being journalists, we are citizens. And obviously, it is important to have a sense of responsibility in what we do in the name of the public good and of the public interest. But questions are to be asked. Authorities would be equipped to answer the questions, and obviously if there's no answer yet for that specific question, then they can try to look for the relevant information. Being transparent is extremely important. Transparency is very, very important at the time of a public health crisis.
And you think that the Macau government is actually doing a good job in being transparent?
Well, as far as I know, if you look at the overall situation, it seems to me that is satisfactory. As we can only, of course, comment on what we know, of course. But I think overall, yes, I think we've been seeing a situation where the local authorities are faring relatively well. And of course, you know, journalists always want more access to information. And coming back to the questions, you know, whenever someone in the authority deals, because the question is always valid, I think. So when someone feels highly uncomfortable with a question, if someone, the official, the relevant official, is transparent, you know, I think the citizens will understand this is a very stressful situation. They may not have all the answers. So the citizens will judge by themselves. I think all of us, there's a great deal of pressure that is affecting everybody. Journalists, the citizens on social media. People are extremely active nowadays, of course, and because they're home, right? Most of the time, at least until very recently, they have people are highly opinionated, which is normal. There's also a great deal of polarization. I guess what's important is, and it's something that, for instance, Chief Executive Ho Yat-seng was stressing, is that the importance of promoting sort of environmental tolerance. This is really important. So diversity, of course, different opinions, a debate. We should not suspend pluralism because of the crisis, and a sense of responsibility by the different stakeholders, and of course an awareness and understanding that the media, that journalists do play a pivotal role that cannot be replaced by anyone else, because we do have, at least we should have, of course, I mean, there's a lot of shortcomings and flaws, the tools for verification, for fact-checking. And this brings in another issue to the discussion, which is actually issues related to self-regulation, a strong ethical culture and practices, and a strong culture of verification by journalists to stay away from being infected by the so-called fake news epidemics.
Let's go to fake news later, actually. But now I'd like to ask you one thing, which is you mentioned how people are now at home and they are paying more attention to the everyday government press briefing, the live streaming of it. And in fact, if we look at some of the live streaming, the comment sections of those live streaming, we'll see people are pretty eager to question not the authority, but rather
the journalists.
The journalists,
yes.
Like saying that, oh, why are you asking this question? Or even some of them are quite using quite derogative language to describe journalists.
That is sad, of course. Well, yes. Well, it comes with the job, or it comes with our job, being under constant scrutiny as well, right? Contrary to many other professions, right? What we do is quite public.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with live streaming of daily press conferences with dozens of thousands, perhaps hundreds, I'm not sure, watching live the press conference. This is something, again, that we have never experienced.
Yeah.
So I guess many people who have been watching those, the live streaming of those press conferences, they were not perhaps familiar with how, the sort of interaction that you have in a press conference. And of course, all of us, obviously, we, one way or another, are to be held accountable for what we do, what we say.
Yeah.
But those who are in government, the authorities, are the ones that have a special role in all this. This is not the case to say that journalists should brush aside any sort of responsibility or any role. But I think it would be important that citizens would have a better understanding of our role as journalists. I think we should not focus too much on, I hope it's only a handful of, or half a dozen or some dozens of people who engage into this derogatory sort of language, which is sad and regrettable. But people will hopefully, as time goes by, have a better understanding of the role of journalists, and that when they're asking a question, they have an interpretation of what is newsworthy, of what is socially relevant. There's some deal always of subjectivity in all this. Yeah. It's obvious because we, as journalists, we are the outcome of all of our previous experiences and knowledge and interaction and interpretation of what we do, right? Mm-hmm. But I would say that it's not fair to target journalists that way, but I would say it is something that is not representative of what the society as a whole thinks, and their approach to the overall situation. Because, guys, I think people are learning. This is a learning process. We have also to take into account, as I said previously, there's a great deal of polarization. Mm-hmm. And people are, this is a matter that sparks controversy quite easily, so somehow. It has been, it's taking a toll on our daily life. So I think we should somewhat downplay that kind of a phenomenon, and focus on the good job that journalists have been doing, the local media have been doing, and by the way, my personal opinion, as a whole, the good job that authorities are also doing in face of all this.
Okay, so let's go to the fake news area that we're going to talk about. We are also we are in the era of pandemic, and we are also in the era of fake news, sadly speaking. As media, what does this mean to us, actually?
Well, to some extent, this old fake news mantra, fake news has become a buzzword, but this whole thing of fake news is somehow as they say, old wine in new bottles.
Okay.
Because we've been dealing with disinformation for centuries, right? What is new over the past decade or so is the scale and the technological tools that are at the disposal of spreading disinformation. A footnote here. The expression fake news, it is something that I'm not very at ease with.
Okay.
In the sense that, of course, I mean, we use it because there's a common understanding nowadays. Because news, by nature, is not supposed to be fake. News is supposed to be a social construct by journalists who would aim at seeking the truth, or at least something that is close to the truth, intellectually speaking, or in an intellectually honest manner. So I guess, and also when we have fake news, we've got disinformation, we have misinformation, we have malinformation, we have propaganda. These things are not necessarily the same. Actually, they are not. But okay, let's go focus on what we understand and we believe or we consider is fake news. Let's say, information which is deliberately fabricated and published with the intention of deceiving and misleading others into believing in falsehoods or doubting verifiable facts. So it's kind of a way of addressing this. This is different from something that is non-intentional. So we have those who produce intentionally fake news, those who spread and share. And quite often, many people end up sharing for different reasons, because they might be more gullible, or because they might find it funny and they might not be so sure about whether it's true or not, but let's just spread. And others truly believe in that, or because they already have certain prejudice or certain, sort of opinion and belief, which would be more polarized towards one side, and then this kind of so-called fake news will confirm their previous belief. So this is a complex and a huge challenge for journalism. I see a silver lining here, and let me quote a scholar, Charlie Beckett, from the London School of Economics. And I'm quoting now, fake news is the best thing that has happened for decades. It gives mainstream quality journalism the opportunity to show that it has value based on expertise, ethics, engagement, and experience. It is a wake-up call to be more transparent, relevant, and to add value to people's lives. And oh boy, isn't that true today?
So fake news is somehow an alarm clock to wake you up.
Exactly, and we have to rise to the challenge. And this has different layers. And rising to the challenge is to pay more attention and to have a stronger ethical foundation on the one hand, and to pay attention to verification. VVV, verify, verify, verify. Even if it takes more time.
Okay.
Don't jump the gun. Verify. It's really difficult because we are under journalism. This is 24/7. It's so tempting to
just report
and to be the first one to share or try to have a sort of a big
exclusive
social impact.
news.
Exactly. So this is one side. The other side has to do with social awareness. Social awareness, in the sense, I think there's a need for widespread media literacy programs all around the world.
Okay.
Not only in what one can say less developed countries with a lower level of general education, but I would say in many cases, even in so-called developed countries or jurisdictions or regions, you need to start from primary school all the way to secondary and tertiary school education.
So you mentioned that we have to, first and foremost, as journalists, we always have to verify. But sometimes, like in societies like Macau, where we are dominated by Chinese language is kind of, although we have two official languages, Chinese language is for sure the one that we use the most. What does that make the non-Chinese speaking media feel? Like, is it difficult to operate in this kind of society? What are the challenges?
There are several challenges indeed. It's not always easy. Our association, the Macau Portuguese and English Press Association, was established 15 years ago, focusing on promoting press freedom, access to information, training, ethical standards, etc. When we're dealing with access to information, this is extremely critical, very, very important. Because when you look at a more holistic approach to press freedom, it's not only what goes on downstream, it's also about what happens upstream. What I mean is that at the sources level.
Yeah.
Because if you have hurdles, difficulties in having access to information, to sources, then there's a sort of knock-on effect, even though you have a satisfactory environment downstream in terms of what you publish, which is, I still believe, the case in Macau, despite obstacles and risks looming large. So, and then when you add, there are geographical, I would say, societal, I can say constraints or factors. The fact that we are a small place, everybody knows everybody, right? Like we have, some of the challenges that we deal with here are related to something that is quite common in what one could call small town papers.
Okay.
And the relations with the sources in terms of the people or institutions. Chances are that you'll come across the person that you wrote about the previous day, and you have to manage that. Oh, this is part of our job, right? On the other hand, if you are dealing with a more conservative society or people who tend to be more prudent, then you do have all these challenges. And this happens, and I guess applies to media, regardless of whether it's in Chinese, Portuguese, or English. So these are factors that are here, right? I mean, the overall environment, for instance, you know, there's this perception that I do have that even this has been always here, but more recently there's a trend for self-censorship at the sources level. I'm not judging now or doing an analysis within the media organizations. I don't have the tools to do that. But I'm talking about the people that you speak to, the people who tend to be increasingly more prudent.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's a mixed picture here, no doubt about that. But on top of all this, then, let's talk about the issue of language. Yes, in many ways, the access to information is it is mediated, right? Mediated in the sense of going through, of course, in the case of government or public institutions, through translations, right? Through interpreters, which is, let me now speak highly of the people who do this job. Translation is extremely important, and it's not easy to. It's a very challenging job, and I've been witnessing and I've been seeing over these years high-quality, top-notch translators. He's been trying very hard under very challenging situations, especially when you're dealing with interpretation. But having said this, the situation that we are dealing with is not yet satisfactory in terms of access to information. In Portuguese is an official language, so we should look at Portuguese and English differently, but not downplaying at all the importance of English. Actually, we're here, right? So we're using English, and it's very obvious. English is a lingua franca. But of course, Portuguese as a legal status, as an official language. And in that sense, our association, we have been raising awareness. We have issued statements calling on authorities to improve the quality of the information that is made available in Portuguese. And we've been seeing, for instance, in the case of one of the issues and problems that we dealt with had to do with the Health Bureau, which was not always the quality of the translation before was not the best. I can say that it is fair to say that over the past 2 months we've been witnessing an improvement and stronger focus on that. We issued a statement on that by late January, and we believe that we hopefully, together with our colleagues, have managed to raise awareness. There's a shortage of manpower. I can see translation. Chinese to Portuguese translation is not easy. No. I'm not saying that to English it is easy, but perhaps to Portuguese may be more challenging. But it is really important that we want to raise awareness, society, on the importance of bilingualism at the government level, of taking a step further in terms of bilingualism, recognizing, of course, the positive steps that have been taken, but at the same time highlighting some shortcomings that we still deal with. English.
Yeah.
Well, English doesn't have the legal status.
Yeah.
But, well, it is, well, one of the reasons why we have, for instance, here, I guess the TDM, English Language News Services. We have English language media outlets, newspapers, magazines, online news hubs. It is the lingua franca connecting Macau to the outside world in so many ways. In addition, obviously, to Portuguese, to Portuguese-speaking countries, it's extremely important, the role of Macau as a platform in this respect. But it is also, there's something else which makes English and information in English something of public interest and of public good, which is the fact that, and especially in a public health crisis, I think we should have more. Much more public information in English. Perhaps even in, if possible, if doable in Tagalog, in Bahasa, because of the migrant communities here.
Yes.
Dozens of thousands of people who don't speak neither Portuguese, Chinese nor Portuguese. And there's a strong case for this.
Best as well. That their English may not be
exactly. So there's this is a public service that I guess TDM has been doing since 2003. And by the way, this happened by the time of the SARS crisis, when there was this awareness and this notion that there's a need for information in English from the public service broadcaster. And since then, with the opening of the new resorts and the liberalization of the gaming industry and all these investments, we've been having so many migrant workers, people, professionals coming from overseas that have been contributing to Macau's development. So information in English is very important, and despite English not having the legal status of Portuguese, there's obviously a role here. So this is the way we address these matters, and we hope that. And we believe, actually, I believe, because I've seen some improvements over the 17 years that I've been living and based in Macau. So, part of our role is to keep on raising awareness, putting some pressure positively, and hope to see an improved situation. And I guess this public health crisis, it is definitely a case and opportunity to take the whole communication in Portuguese and in English to a higher level, and we've been seeing some of it. So let's hope to see more.
Let's hope. Thank you very much. José,
Thank you very much. My big pleasure, my great pleasure. Thank you.
And that's all for tonight's talk show. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Good night.